Hello again. Welcome back. Today we're talking about asexual reproduction. Now, what does that even mean? Well, see, there's something called sexual reproduction where there's a male and a female, and the male produces sperm and the female produces eggs. That can even be in all kinds of life, not just humans, plants, different animals, sperm, egg, meat. That's called sexual reproduction. You got one cell and another, they join, and they become a new organism with some of the information from one parent and some of the information from another parent. But in asexual reproduction, we're talking normally about simpler forms of life and plants and maybe molds and bacteria and things like that, where there's just one cell and it needs to regenerate. Bacteria is a great example of this, right? Where there's a bacteria cell, but the bacterial infection or the bacteria will grow and it will recreate copies of itself. The bacteria is not finding a male bacteria and a female bacteria and mating and creating baby bacteria. No, no, no. That's not how simple organisms recreate. They do something called asexual, which means without sex, right? So non-sexual reproduction, no male and female, just one thing making a copy of itself somehow. That'd be cool if I could just asexually reproduce, make another Mr. Sitnick, that'd be all right, but that is not the case. So let's talk. Now, the first thing I want you to know is that your assignment today is going to just be very easy. This is going to be one of the easiest assignments there is. All you need to do is write a few notes. I'm talking like this won't take you any time at all, but this is lesson 8, so assignment 8 will be doing the notes that I tell you to do and writing them on the sheet. Very easy notes today. So the first set of slides is just kind of giving you an overview, and the second set of slides is much better information. So let's just look at types of asexual reproduction. One is called binary fission. Now here's a thing that's hard for students to understand. Binary fission just means if the thing we're talking about is a simple organism like a bacteria and it undergoes mitosis, which just means making one cell into two. Well, if a bacteria just made one cell into two, it has actually reproduced because that is the whole organism. So binary fission just means equals mitosis. I might even change that and say equals simple mitosis in single-celled organisms. So that's what I would probably say for that, right? That just means this thing is going to go through interphase, prophase, metaphase, anaphase, and telophase and make more copies of itself. Don't worry too much because we're going to get into a much better explanation right away. This is just an overview. Budding, for example, a hydra reproduces asexually through budding where a bud forms, a little bud forms. It develops into an adult and breaks away, and this bud would fall in and grow as a new hydra. That's budding. So now we've got binary fission, which is just mitosis. Then we've got budding. Let's look at the next one. Sporulation. We'll get into some details of that one right now. No notes to take. I've got good notes for you coming up. Don't worry. But you could see that obviously spores are released and there's something called sporangium. And obviously this looks like a case of bread mold here. Vegetative propagation. Sometimes we might call that, so let's slide over here. Vegetative propagation, we might call that splicing. Write that down. You don't need to take a picture of that. Just take a picture of the last page of this assignment for me. Just this page when we get to this here. That's all you need. I'll give you a few notes there, and that's all you need to send for this one. The other stuff, you can write it. You don't need to send me a picture of it. Just send me a picture of the last page of this section for this lesson. So splicing, vegetative propagation, is where you cut something off, you plant it, and you put the cutting in, and it grows into a new form of the plant. We do that all the time in the plant club next door. So the last one is regeneration. And the example I always like to use of regeneration is, of course, the starfish. Did you know that if you break a starfish off, if you break a piece of it off, it'll grow into a whole new starfish? So we'll talk about that right away. Now this is the better sheet. So I've included the slides we just looked at, and I've also included this set of slides, which is what you have here. You have types of asexual reproduction right there. It's the same thing. I just took a a picture and put it in a slide here for you. So binary fission, this is the process by which unicellular organisms divide by mitosis, so I'd underline that, that's the first thing you should do, into two equal halves. So all you got to do on the side of the margin here is draw one cell becomes two. This happens in bacteria, algae. Those are things you might want to know. So now you know what it happens in, and you know kind of what it is, right? So that's important. So this just means that a cell gets big, breaks into two. That's called binary fission if the whole living thing is just a one-celled thing anyway. A human is not a one-celled thing, but a bacteria is. So if it just makes a copy, that's called binary fission. Next up, we've got budding. Budding in unicellular organisms. So that's a one-celled organism again, right? So like a hydra is a one-celled organism technically. In a unicellular organism, this process is similar to binary fission, but the parent cell keeps most of the cytoplasm. So it just makes a little bud that breaks off and grows, but the parent keeps most of it. Because in binary fission, normally in the one we just looked at, binary fission, the cell goes up and the parent breaks and they're both equal. Well, in budding, it just makes a little bud and the bud goes away and starts from scratch, but the parent still is big the whole time mostly, right? So similar to binary fission, but the parent cell keeps most of the cytoplasm. In multicellular organisms, a miniature version of the organism grows directly on the body of the adult. When it's big enough, it can detach from the parent to become an independent organism. So what do we need to do here? I would say little version breaks off and the parent keeps most of the cytoplasm, detaches from the parent to become an independent organism. And your example is a hydra. Write that. So that's your notes for that. Now we go into sporulation. Sporulation is a little tricky. But the biggest thing for a test is that you need to know what the 5 types of asexual reproduction are. Give me a one-sentence description of them, and give me an example of something that happens in, which is going to be an assignment you're going to have right away anyway, so don't worry too much. Sporulation, this is the process by which an organism produces reproductive cells called spores by mitosis. So these right here, these spore sacs, they make a bunch of spores. So it starts out with just something simple, and a bunch of mitosis happens here, and it grows more and more until you get these big spore sacs, and then they're going to open, right? So you can see they've created spores. The organism stores these spores in sporangia, which burst open to release spores that are capable of producing adult organisms. So basically, a spore sac is created, it opens, and the spores spread out, and if they land on the right environment, they'll be able to grow up on their own as well. Bread mold. Sporulation can also be a sexual type of reproduction, but don't worry about that right now. So what do you need to know? I would say produces reproductive cells by mitosis, burst open, capable of producing adults. An example would be bread mold. That would be the most important things. Don't need to write anything there. Next up, vegetative propagation. This is the process by which a new organism is created from the roots, stems, or leaves of a plant. So that's what I called on the last page. You would put splicing here. So I would do on this one, created from roots, stems, or leaves of plants. That's what I would say. I would circle that. And I would say trees, strawberries, things like that, right? It's all plants. That's what I would say for that. So vegetative propagation is just taking a splice of a root or a stem or a leaf, planting it, and growing a new one from it. And it happens in most plants you can splice. And the last one is regeneration, and that is the last type of asexual reproduction, and that is when a multicellular organism is divided into fragments, and each fragment can grow into its own. So for example, if you take a starfish and break it into 5 pieces, as long as there's a little piece of that middle, so if you were talking here, if you took a starfish and you just broke a little chunk of that middle out, as long as there was some of that core area, each one of those, if you took it, it would grow a whole new starfish from it. So you can make 5 starfish. So if you're at the beach and you hate the starfish, don't take them and rip them up, because the next day you'll have 5 times as many. So regeneration is just when you take a part and each fragment grows into its own. What should you write here? I would say fragments. Each fragment becomes a new organism. And I would say sea stars, sponges are good examples of that. So that's all you needed to do today. So the only thing you have to do for your assignment is just prove that you watched the video and submit this page in. Take a picture of this. And now on the next slide, we're going back and doing another microviewer activity. But this time the microviewer we're going to be looking at is going to be an asexual reproduction microviewer. We'll see you soon.